This evening's program is one of tragedy, trial, tribulation, and triumph. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." We often hear of our Black boys and men losing their lives to ongoing police brutality. But what we do not know is that each day about 26 Black African American males are killed by guns, and susceptibility to gang influence is possible from the early age of 8 into the 20s. I am not a parent, but I know that as parents, you pray for your children's safety, you pray for their well-being, and you pray that the decisions they make are guided by God's direction. I pray that the real talk we're about to have will open doors for conversation and discussion with the young boys and the young men in your lives. My guest this evening is Kevin Roberson. He is a father who raised his son in the church, but his son's life's decisions were filled with repercussions and consequences. We are going to have some real talk as we learn about his son, Ehrik Xavier Williams. We are going to learn about the choices he made that led to his murder.
Ehrik Williams was walking to his Hempstead home October 15th when the 25-year-old was gunned down in broad daylight. His family members believe there were numerous witnesses, but so far, no one has said a word to police.
Thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you coming on to share and be a voice for your son.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure being here.
So tell us about Ehrik. Tell us about the type of young man that he was.
Ehrik was vibrant, popular, easy to talk to, somewhat of a ladies' man, athletic, and gifted.
Gifted. And he was also raised in the church.
Yes, he was. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us about raising your son as a child of faith. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, being a child in the church, he was active in many activities in the church as well. He was, majority of his younger years, he spent time in church with his grandmother. Grandmother faithfully went to church on Sunday. She was a Baptist. But yet and still, regardless of the fact, he was dedicated, witty, quick learner, active participant in church. And people loved him.
So at some point, Ehrik decided to join a gang.
Yes.
The Bloods.
Yes.
Tell us how you found out about his gang affiliation. Was it something that you just haphazardly found out, or is it something that he came and disclosed to you? How did you find out about your son's gang affiliation?
I kind of found out through the grapevine, so to speak. I would hear bits and pieces about his extracurricular activities. At the time, Ehrik was 17 when I found out. And I don't know how the initiation process began, but nevertheless, him and a neighborhood friend of the family were in the gang, the Bloods. I don't think they were exactly in the same, what would you call it? Affiliation as far as chapter, but yet and still they were members of the same gang.
And how did his being a part of a gang affect the family? How did it affect his interaction with the family and your interaction as a father with your son? How did that affect you?
I had strong opposition. I didn't quite understand what would make him turn to that. He was well loved, although our relationship at the time was somewhat strained. His mother lived in a different household. We weren't together. He lived in a different city, even though he went to school in the same district at which I lived. But because of that, he was able to go in the same school district that I lived, even though he lived in another district. So the district requires that at least one family member live in that district in order for the child to go to school.
Okay.
So with that being said, he had a lot of time on his hands because even though he wasn't directly a part of my household per se, he would come over after school. He would congregate with his brothers and sister, and it appeared everything was okay. But one day he came home, and I think this might have been the trigger that he had been jumped by some gang members from MS-13. So in that process, it was in the wintertime, he had his coat stolen. So if it wasn't for the fact that a transit bus driver happened to see what was going on, Ehrik probably would have been dead or seriously injured because the gang member had picked up a brick to throw it at Ehrik's head. So I think that was the turning point because Ehrik was tall and slender. He didn't have a lot of weight on him. So in my opinion, he felt the need to have some type of security or belonging. So I believe that was the start of the whole process.
And prior to Ehrik's death, did he ever share with you, or I know you just mentioned you had strong opposition. Did you ever share with him and have a conversation regarding your feelings and your thoughts on him being affiliated with a gang? And did he ever share with you the possibility that you mentioned of feeling needed and wanted as his reason for joining the gang? Did you two have a conversation as to why he made this decision in his life?
In a roundabout way, we did. He felt different. He didn't feel at one point that I loved him. And that's a hurting thing to hear from your child.
Wow.
Even though you may work hard, you try to provide everything and this and that, but it wasn't enough. The material things were sufficient, but the paternal bonding between father and son wasn't meeting the goals. I worked a lot of hours. I worked 6 days a week. I only had the Sabbath off. At sunset, back to work. So I did a lot to provide for my children. That's another story, but
Yes, yes.
but
yes,
with that being said,
yes.
he felt that he wasn't loved like the rest of them. That's what he conveyed to me. And I said, how do you feel? What makes you say that? He said, well, Daddy, you kind of don't treat me like you treat the others. And I didn't really understand why he would say that. Maybe because of the fact that he was in a different household and the dynamics of the household was different.
Right.
Because the way my household was set up and the way I was raised, we had devotion and everything. So that part of him, when he left South Carolina, living with his grandmother, to come back to New York, that kind of changed for him. So that left a gateway or a doorway open for him to go into different things, explore different things. The dynamics of his life just changed so quickly. It's
Interesting that you mention you provided for your son. You worked long hours. In having a conversation with you prior to the show and in doing research for the show, it does show that a lot of our young men and our young boys are finding what they think is love from fellow gang members, or feeling accepted is also another reason for joining. And I know that in today's society we have a lot of single homes, single mothers, single fathers, and even families that have both parents. And they're working long hours just to survive. And in doing that, the children or the child can feel neglected,
Yes.
thus seeking that acceptance elsewhere. So it's interesting that you brought that up, because in doing research for the show, it showed that. And we may have a lot of our young boys and young men nowadays who are feeling that way. And so it's my hope, as I mentioned in the introduction, that this talk will open avenues for discussions and conversations in households. So how long was Ehrik a gang member?
From the time I discovered that he was a gang member to his demise, about 7 years.
Wow.
7 years.
Wow. And share with us some of the experiences that Ehrik went through because of this affiliation. Meaning, share with us some of the consequences, jail time, or certain things that he went through because of this decision that he made.
Ehrik got into trouble when he was 17. Because he was underage and he had a good lawyer, his mother hired a good attorney, rather, he got probation due to the fact that he was underage and that it was his first prior. And that he was on probation for 7 years, providing that he didn't get into trouble. So with that being said, he got into trouble. It's just crazy. How he got into trouble, he picked up a neighbor who was also a gang member, the one I had mentioned previously, and he had another accomplice. So they went further out on Long Island to pick up this gang member, him and the other person. And so he told me that the intent was to go rob someone. a drug dealer. In another city. Upon picking up the other fellow gang member, the vehicle that they had was from out of state. I don't remember exactly what state it was registered to. So the police saw them in passing, made a U-turn, and started following them. Ehrik happened to be driving, and he just did some maneuvers to throw the police off his tail. So they pulled into a driveway, and they all got out. Police found them and asked them for ID and registration. Ehrik didn't have a license. He was underage, but he could drive very well. They also noticed, according to what was told to me, that there was a jacket in the vehicle. The jacket, according to the story that was told to me, was marked FBI. So with that being said, that drew suspicion. So they searched the car even further. They found a handgun. I don't recall whether it was loaded or not. And so they impounded the vehicle. They called the person who the car was registered to, because at this point it was suspect that the car was stolen. Found out that Ehrik had a prior unregistered weapon, of course, underage. Needless to say, well, they locked him up, all three of the individuals. I don't know what happened to one of the members in the car, but my son, Ehrik, and the other gang member, they ended up in jail. They weren't booked, they weren't tried, they were just sitting there. So it got to the point that the other gang member, who I happened to know, and I knew his mother, he had called his mother. His mother called me, and we did a three-way. All of a sudden, he says, well, you need to tell Ehrik to confess, because he knows that it's not my gun. I just happened to get in the car and all this and all that. So he came at me in a very condescending way. So his mother apologized for his behavior. And so finally, make a long story short, as far as that's concerned, Ehrik confessed that the weapon was his.
And how many times would you say that you went through that with Ehrik, in terms of incident after incident or jail time after jail time? How many times, or just share with us what was that like, going through that with your son?
Twice. Very stressful for his mother. And I believe that different things are, when it comes to a child, mothers are more prone to be affected more so than the fathers. I guess it's that maternal instinct versus paternal, and the fact that he went through a lot. Just give you a little brief history that Ehrik was a preemie, and there were some questionable things during his birth. With that being said, he was a lovable child. By the grace of God, he came through with no problems or no disabilities, anything like that. So I can imagine that played a havoc on his mother's countenance, and the fact that his brother also was locked up previously.
Okay.
So being a mother, two sons locked up, hearing one of your children say, well, I'll never go through that. I'm not going to be locked up. Lo and behold,
It happened.
it happened. So for me, it was frustrating, but to see his mother go through that mentally and then affect her physically to the point that at some point she had a stroke. She lost a lot. Just put it in a word. It kind of reminds me of what Job in the Bible went through. So she went through some of the same things that he did. You could say you're sorry, and I understand to a degree that you're going through, but you really don't, because you're a man. She's a woman. You feel something because it's your son. You talk to your son. You warn him of the dangers. He grew up in the church. He knew of the consequences. But to live it is a totally different thing than to see and to read about it, what happens to others. No matter sometimes how much you try to steer them, at some point they have to make choices on their own.
Absolutely.
And with that being said, you want them to learn the lesson, but it's painful to see them go through this. But they're quick to say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You're old. Things are different now. Really, they're not. It's just the circumstances may change.
Yeah.
But the parodies are still the same.
Yes. I can't imagine how stressful it was, not just on you, but his mother and the family. You want the best for your child or your children.
Yes.
And, you want to save them from certain mistakes in life. But, like you said, it's difficult because sometimes, they have to create their own journey.
Yes.
But you try to make the falls a little softer,
Yes.
But like you said, the consequences of their decisions, of decisions in life,
Yes.
Follow us. So before Ehrik passed, you shared with me that he said something to you. Share with us and tell us what that was and what that meant.
Ehrik had gotten out in, I believe, earlier part of the year 2014. His brother and sister went to go pick him up from upstate New York. And I was happy that they still shared that bond, that unity, because I feel regardless of your circumstances, if you have some type of support, then it makes the journey that much easier. So I was talking on the phone with him via three-way. My daughter had called and she put Ehrik on the phone. Ehrik and I were talking. I had moved here to South Florida, so I was no longer able to actually physically see my children on a day-to-day basis or a weekly or monthly. Yes. So the plan was to bring Ehrik down for Christmas of 2014. And we were talking, and he said, well, Daddy, you still love driving trucks? I said, yeah, I haven't driven in a while, but I still love the trucks. And he said, oh, you plan to go back to the road? I said, that's not in the future at this point. So the plan, like I said, was for him to come down with my two other children. And he said, sometimes I feel like I don't have too much more time to live. And that kind of threw me. I said, why would you say that? He said, I just feel like that. I don't have too much longer to live. I said, well, you got to think positive. I tried to say something to kind of dispel that type of thinking, because I always believe, well, if no matter what I'm going through, there's a lesson to be learned. Whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, I can always learn from it, whether I learn from it directly or somebody that I affiliate or around learns from it. So that's why what I try to instill in my children, I always say, I'm not gonna always be around, so you're gonna have to learn to do things for yourself. What would you do if I wasn't around? That's what I always taught my children at a very young age. What would you do if I wasn't around? How would you perceive life? What would you do in life? How would you go about it? So with that being said, I said, well, let's talk about this at a later point in time. Unfortunately, about 7 or 8 weeks later, I got a call from Erik's child's mother. It was about 3:15 in the afternoon. I think it was a Wednesday or a Thursday. She said, they got him. What are you talking about? They got him. They killed Ehrik. I said, stop. They killed him. And I said, oh, no. And what came to mind is what he had said a few weeks earlier. First thing came to mind, I said, nah, he's hurt. He's not dead. And lo and behold, I got in contact with his two other siblings, and they broke down. I was in shock. I'm not one to display my feelings like that. Something may happen. I may shed a little slight tear. But that was it. I was determined. I wanted to know what happened. So I heard rumors that Ehrik was on his way home from probation. He had probation earlier that day. And there were people that heard shots. They saw what happened, but nobody came forth, which just teed me off. If it was your son or your daughter, wouldn't you want somebody to divulge some information about your child? So I came up, I went to New York, trying to find out information. Where was he? What time this happened? What time he had probation? How far away he was from home? I used to do undercover investigations when I was in New York, so I kind of knew how procedure went. But to no avail, nobody came forth. I did an interview with News 12 Long Island. I also met with an advocate on Long Island who happens to deal with crisis and situations like this with families who had victims of gun violence.
They help you get answers. They help you.
She was a great catalyst. She kept me in the loop about things when I didn't hear from Nassau County. I spoke to a detective. He asked me some questions, and I spoke to the district attorney. But after that, I didn't hear anything.
So tell us what happened. How was Ehrik killed?
From what I was told, Ehrik was shot point blank 5 times. This I know he was shot point blank because I happened to see the coroner's report, the autopsy, at the funeral home. I read the report. I saw Ehrik in the casket before anybody else did. So I was gracious that the funeral home allowed me to see him after they had prepped him. So I read the report. Ehrik was shot, and he died on his way to the hospital, DOA. The hospital was approximately about 5 miles away. Nassau County Medical Center, that's what they called it at the time. And no one had answers. A lot of speculation. They thought, well, it was revenge for something that happened while Ehrik was incarcerated. Nobody could really say. There was speculation where this person did that, that person had it out for him. I know for a fact that Nassau County was after Ehrik for some time for some alleged charges, but they could never have anything to pin to him, so to speak. So my thing is, of course, this is my opinion, that because he eluded the police for so long, well, they chopped it up that this is just another dead N-word for the books. That's how I felt.
The death of just another young black boy.
Yeah. So I heard from the DA, I think November of that year, but that was it. I didn't hear anything else. My daughter kept in contact with the investigating detective from time to time. He got information from her. They said they had leads, but they weren't able to share anything with us at the time because they were investigating, but nothing came of it. So essentially, it became a cold case. They wouldn't say that, but if I didn't hear anything and you're not telling me anything new, to me, that's a cold case.
Well, it may have been a cold case, but eventually someone was arrested for the murder of your son. So share with us who this person was, why it was deemed that he murdered your son, and tell us about where it stands right now, where this person is concerned, this felon is concerned.
Yes. I got a call December 15th of 2021 from a friend of the family stating that...
That was a long time. That was a number of years.
7 years.
Yes.
7 years
Yes.
and some months.
Yes.
I got a call from a friend of the family stating that a detective was trying to get in contact with me because at that time, well, I had moved down to Florida, no longer in New York, they got a killer in possession for Ehriks' death. So I got the number, I called the detective. This is a different detective, not the one who initiated the investigation. From what I understand, the one who initiated the investigation had retired. So I spoke to the detective. This detective also worked in the gang unit in different various parts of Long Island. So he was familiar with different cliques, with the Bloods, the Crips, and whomever else, MS-13, just to name a few. So he said that this young man by the name of Dylan Cruz confessed to the murder of Ehrik. I said, how so? I said, why after so many years now? So the detectives told me that, well, he struck a deal with the feds, not the county, not the state, not New York State, not Nassau County, but the feds, because they were being pressured to crack down on these major gangs. So he used to work the gang unit, like I said. And so somebody had reached out to him and kind of implicated this young man. You need to check him out. come to find out that they already had this man in possession. He had been in jail since 2018 for other crimes and another murder. He murdered someone in 2018 in Baldwin, Long Island. So my son, his murder was 2014. And the crazy thing about it is, Ehrik got killed, according to what the detective told me, by mistaken identity. Ehrik went to court that morning for probation. And
Went to see his probation officer.
yes. And it just so happens that another guy who has the same last name, same bill as Ehrik, was supposed to show up, who didn't. So that kind of makes you think, well, how did this guy, Dylan Cruz, know who to go for? So Ehrik and this guy by the name of Ehrik Williams, I believe his name is, they have the same bill, same physique and everything, tall and slender, and last name Williams. Okay, so this guy could have been in the court system or courts, heard Williams, because they call you last name first and then Ehrik or Andre. And long story short, Ehrik was on his way home. He was a block and a half away from home. And so the story goes that he shot Ehrik because the intended person, the intended target, was robbing fellow gang members who were friends of him, Dylan Cruz. And so he wanted revenge. So with that being said, according to what was told to me, Dylan Cruz confessed to the murder.
So do you have any information regarding the perpetrator? Do you know the status of his sentence, or where does that stand? Do you have any information regarding that?
As of January 2022 of this year, he was arraigned in criminal court, federal court in Islip, Long Island. The sentencing for Dylan Cruz was supposed to be February 28th, 2022. However, that got pushed back to April 8th of 2022. So far, it's still a go. He cut a deal with the feds, so I don't know exactly what he's facing as far as time. Possibly, if I had to give a number, 30, 40 years possibly.
Okay.
As opposed to getting life.
Okay.
But it all depends on what the judge and who the judge is, what the judge says and who it is.
As we know, a plea deal is always the easy way out.
Yes.
But how do you feel knowing that someone has been arrested, someone has been caught for the murder of your son? How do you feel? What kind of feelings did it bring to life for you about this person? Were you angry at this person now? And knowing that the case is not fully closed yet. There's really no closure. And how is that for you, knowing that there's still this ongoing thing and process regarding the murder?
It's bittersweet for several reasons. I personally don't feel that this is the person. I think this person is a patsy. However, I guess somebody had to take the blame at some point. with that being said, there's some relief. Unfortunately, Erik's mother is not around to witness that. She passed in October of last year, 3 days after the anniversary of his death.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And she didn't get to see or even hear the outcome or possible outcome. So that's painful, knowing that she didn't get to this point, to this juncture about her child, her youngest child, which is, it's just, again, a trial or tribulation, tragedy. I can't say something is better than nothing, because it still doesn't ease the pain. It doesn't take away the total anger, especially hearing that your child was mistakenly killed for somebody else. This whole situation has taught me how to have patience, because I was angry. I used to say things, well, if I had the money, I would hire somebody or work with somebody, because I do know some things about investigation, how procedure works. And I believe the Lord put me here in Florida for a reason, because if I was in New York, this whole thing would have probably turned out differently. I would have, who knows, did something along the lines of being a vigilante or who knows what.
Yeah. Anger can do that. Anger can overtake you. And you felt that you had that much anger that you would have probably done something? Sure,
Yes. And I probably wouldn't have regretted it.
Wow.
I'm just speaking how I feel.
Yeah.
My children know that I will do anything within reason that's right for them. And I thank Elohim for keeping me to see at least this far down the road. And I think about it that Erik's daughter, my grandchild, she was 4. Now she's 11. She doesn't have that experience of having two parents, of knowing, because she looks just like him. She's a spitting image of him.
So she's a reminder. She's a constant reminder
Yes.
of him. Constant reminder.
And she was 4 when he passed. Now she's 11.
When I spoke with you, you shared with me something that, and I don't want to use the word unbelievable, but it struck me. You stated that you have not grieved your son yet. It's been a number of years. There is no time. There's no time limit or time set on grieving. But I was struck when you mentioned you haven't yet grieved your son. Why is that?
I don't know exactly. Maybe because I experienced death in my family at an early age. I was 11 when my father passed away. And when I found out that he passed away, I cried the day it happened. During the funeral, the burial, didn't cry. It wasn't, and I was 11, it wasn't until the fact that I was in my early 20s and I went to see my father's grave that I cried. I can't explain it. I try to, find logic. What is the purpose of me grieving? I can't bring them back. I guess it's a way to relieve, but I guess everybody has their own way of relief.
Yeah. So you haven't cried for your son?
I shedded a tear. I haven't cried. I think of him and I get sad. And when I hear of similar instances from other people that happened to them, it makes me think about him. I haven't cried. I don't know if I ever will, maybe. Do I want to? Yes. I feel more for others than I guess I feel for my personal feelings. But it inspired me, his death inspired me to be a better man, to be a better parent, to be more open, to be more receptive, to not take things so nonchalant or so much for granted, but to have a purpose, not to let his death be in vain. And I say that because there was a person who kind of, at the time of Erik's death, I met her in New York. And so she created, so to speak, a coalition for, like I said before, victims of gun violence. And so that inspired me to do something so that I can help other people have a platform to speak or talk about, divulge information, or express how they feel.
Well, since you mentioned, I was going to get to it, but since you mentioned that you have this experience and this has created a platform for you to share with other people, share with us what it is that this has allowed you to do in order to honor your son's death and to share with other people.
Yes, at the time when Ehrik passed away, I was in school for broadcasting. So I thought, what about creating a platform for people to talk about, to inform, to help people in a situation that, like what happened to me. So I named the radio station, I have an internet radio station called Imperial Network. Imperial, the word Imperial means the Most High. So I wanted the name to be significant and to mean the Most High on several levels. I know it's a bit deep, but yet and still, it was inspired by my son. More so, it was inspired by the Most High, Elohim, to help people. And in the same process, it's also helping me. So I always say, one of my logos is, help me, help you, to help each other.
Well, this may be your grieving process.
It may be. It may be. It may be. I didn't quite look at it that way, but maybe it's a healing tool for me.
Yes, absolutely. And tell me, have you felt supported through this? I'm not going to pin it down to whether it's by the church or friends or family. Have you felt supported through this?
To a degree, yes. I feel there's plenty of work to be done. It hasn't always gone the way I wanted to, but then you got to realize nothing worthwhile comes easy, and the rewards are great. So I'm giving of myself to give to others that don't have a voice, that don't have anywhere to turn to gather information, to put the information to use, to create, like I said, I created this platform for those who don't have a voice or those who don't know where to turn. And in its process, making life an inspiration and better for not only for me, but for those out there as well.
I'm happy to hear that. This show has been about upliftment and encouragement. And a lot of the guests that have been on have shared their testimonies and their stories in order to uplift and encourage others. So that's very, that is quite a platform that you have created. And I'm sure it has been healing. That may be, like I said, your healing process or your grieving process, but I'm sure it has inspired others that are going through the same thing. So in closing, I just want to tell you, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and Ehriks' story. I'm not a parent. I can't begin to imagine or even feel or grieve the loss of a child. I have nieces and nephews, and I know that I love them with my soul. So to think that if I lost one of them, how hurtful that would be. And so I thank you so much, and I admire what you're doing in honor of your son. And as we close, I'm just going to ask you just to share a few words of encouragement to young boys or men, or, you know, we keep saying young boys and young men. We have young women as well who are gang members.
Yes.
And so I just want you to share a few words of encouragement and upliftment to young people who may be thinking of joining and being affiliated with gangs, and just share, because of your trial and tragedy of what you've been through, just look into the camera and just give some words of upliftment to our young people.
Sure. My advice to you all, young and old, find something positive every day, put it into your life, and execute it. Life is what you make it.
Yes.
It doesn't matter how bad you have it. Somebody has it worse than you do. You always have a choice. You may not have the choice now, but at some point, given time, you will have it. Tomorrow is not promised. So, with that being said, if you look forward towards tomorrow, what are you going to do today to make it to tomorrow? I encourage you, I implore you, I challenge you all to be the very best person that you can be. Because what you do not only affects you, it affects your family and those around you in the world. Each of us has to teach each other. We learn from each other. You don't have to go through something to learn. Learn from other people's mistakes or downfalls. If it's something negative, there's something positive that can come out of it for you. Only you have the strength and the fortitude to find what it is. May Elohim bless you all as you travel this, so to speak, busy walk of life. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Those were some powerful words, and thank you for the encouragement. Thank you for sharing your story, your journey, and for honoring your son. We appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome.
And to your viewers, thank you for watching. If you have someone that you would like to see on the show, feel free to contact us at realtalkwithmichelle1@gmail.com. I hope today's show was uplifting and inspiring, and I do hope that it opened the avenues for conversations and discussion. Until next time, let's have some real talk.